Hey there guys, this is Richard, your host, with another marvelous video. HBO's new Game of Thrones prequel transports us to Westeros hundreds of years earlier. House of the Dragon is set 170 years before the birth of Daenerys Targaryen. It explores the history of her royal family during a turbulent period and a devastating internecine battle known as the Dance of the Dragons. During this struggle, a slew of Targaryens and their dragon steeds fought for the Iron Throne. These fire-breathing monsters were more common during this period in Westerosi history. But did you know that not all dragons had a Targaryen rider? We've seen Laenor Velaryon, despite not being a real Targaryen, riding a dragon well in the House of the Dragon Episode 3. And then later, we also see the young princes of Rhaenyra also riding dragons. Only people with House Targaryen family blood are supposed to be able to ride dragons in the Game of Thrones chronology, which became another means to establish Jon Snow's ancestry. House of the Dragon, on the other hand, breaches this norm for a while by showing that dragon riding isn't totally unique to House Targaryen. However, you'll find dragons on this list who were ridden by Targaryens at some point in their lives. So, without further ado, let's look at 10 dragons that were not always under the Targaryens. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Arrax. Starting off the list with the most tragic dragon and his young rider, as seen getting killed in the finale of Season 1 of House of the Dragon. What? Of course there will be spoilers. Jacaerys, Lucerys, and Joffrey were Princess Rhaenyra Targaryen's first 3 sons from her marriage with Sir Laenor Velaryon. The opposing side in court disseminated rumors that Rhaenyra's 3 children were not indeed Laenor's, but rather bastards fathered by Sir Harwin Strong. To prove that he thought Rhaenyra and her sons to be the rightful successors to the kingdom, her father ordered that a dragon egg be placed in each of the boys' cradles in order for them to bond with the dragons that emerged from them. Those who questioned Rhaenyra's boys' paternity also questioned if the eggs would ever hatch, but they were shortly disappointed when each of the eggs hatched in turn. The hatchlings were called Vermax, Arrax, and Tyraxes, who bonded with Jacaerys, Lucerys, and Joffrey, respectively. Arrax is flown to Storm's End by Lucerys at the onset of the Civil War to relay a message to Lord Boros Baratheon regarding House Baratheon's allegiance to Rhaenyra Targaryen's cause. Both are astonished by the appearance of Vhagar, revealing that Aemon Targaryen is also at Storm's End as they land in the courtyard of the castle and dismount. Later, while a storm rages above the castle, Arrax becomes concerned but is reassured by his rider. They take off and attempt to fly back to Dragonstone, but they're hampered by the torrential rain and severe winds. Aemond, riding on Vhagar, then pursues them over Shipbreaker Bay, seeking vengeance for his missing eye. Arrax flies down into a gorge near the shore as Aemond threatens Lucerys, causing Vhagar to fly up and abandon the chase. Arrax, on the other hand, ambushes Vhagar and burns the old dragon with his flame. Lucerys regains command and instructs him to fly above the storm clouds. An infuriated Vhagar assaults them from the side, biting Arrax to pieces and devouring Lucerys whole, despite seeming safe in the clear air. The hue of Arrax is not specified in the extant books. However, Sam Hogg, the artist commissioned for the 2021 A Song of Ice and Fire calendar, sought George R.R. Martin's star for clarification and was told that Arrax's coloring was pearlescent white with a yellow flame, golden eyes, and a golden breast. He was mature enough to ride at the start of the dance, but still young and developing. He was 5 times smaller than Vhagar. Sea Smoke. Sea Smoke was a dragon ridden by Sir Laenor Velaryon and afterward by Adam of Hull, the Dragon Seed. Sea Smoke was Laenor's pride and passion. He was a juvenile dragon when he was bonded to Laenor Velaryon in 101 AC, although he had not yet been mounted. Following Laenor's passing in 120 AC, Sea Smoke established a lair in the Dragonmont on the island of Dragonstone and went almost 10 years without a rider. During the Dance of the Dragons, Laenor's son, Prince Jacaerys Velaryon, sought fresh dragon riders for his group. He promised knighthood, lands, and wealth to anyone who could claim the riderless dragons. Most attempts to claim a dragon resulted in death or severe burns in an event known as the Red Sowing. Sir Steffon Darklyn, one of Rhaenyra Targaryen's Queensguard, was slain by Sea Smoke in one of these attempts. However, the 15-year-old Adam of Hull was later able to claim and ride Sea Smoke. Adam used Sea Smoke to shield his younger brother Alan of Hull from Sheepstealer during his attempt to seize him. Although it was first stated that the late Laenor's children, Adam and Lyn, were bastards, it was subsequently discovered that they were actually the offspring of Laenor's dad, Lord Corlys Velaryon of Driftmark. As a result, Adam of Hull became Sir Adam Velaryon, the heir to Driftmark, after Corlys convinced Queen Rhaenyra to remove the stigma of illegitimacy from Adam and Alan. In any event, Sea Smoke's acceptance of Adam was likely influenced by his biological connection to the beast's prior rider. Sea Smoke was one of 5 dragons who took part in the Battle of the Gullet against the Triarchy and the fall of King's Landing. When it was agreed that Queen Rhaenyra would stay in King's Landing, Syrax, Sea Smoke, and Tyraxes were supposed to be enough to defend the city, and the rest of the dragon riders proceeded to war. While at the capital, Sea Smoke was confined in the Dragon Pit. Many voices in the Black Council question Sir Adam's fidelity with the 2 betrayers in their minds, which is a historical event and will be explained many times in this video. Only the Queen's Hand, Lord Corlys Velaryon, defended the Dragon Seed, stating that Sir Adam and his brother Alan were real heirs and deserving of Driftmark. Queen Rhaenyra, fearing a turncloak, ordered Sir Luther Largent to arrest Adam in the Dragon Pit, despite the Hand's passionate objections. Sir Adam, who had been forewarned, managed to depart with Sea Smoke before he could be questioned. The Queen lost not just a dragon but also her hand by ordering Adam's imprisonment. Corlys was tortured and imprisoned as punishment for warning Adam. Sir Adam was keen to illustrate that not all bastards are betrayers when the Second Battle of Tumbleton began. Sir Adam assaulted Tumbleton at night, catching the Greens off guard. As mayhem spread, Adam could see the action below him devolving into shambles. 2 opposing dragon riders, Hugh Hammer and Daeron the Daring, had died at this point. While Adam couldn't have known, he could see Vermithor, Silverwing, and Tessarion, 3 Targaryen dragons. Tessarion took flight without a rider, and Adam turned his dragon to meet her. Because they were both young dragons, they battled quickly and nimbly. The struggle ended when the riderless, furious Vermithor ascended into the skies and began murdering those on the ground indiscriminately. Sea Smoke swooped down on him as the Bronze Fury wreaked havoc, pushing him howling into the muck. According to Archmaester Gildane, Adam must have felt obligated to protect his soldiers on the ground, even if he knew deep down that Sea Smoke could not compete with the older dragon. The riderless Blue Queen quickly joined the conflict, and all 3 dragons died on the ground in muck, blood, and smoke. Vermithor murdered Sea Smoke by locking his fangs into his neck and ripping off his head. Lord Unwin Peake ordered a retreat following the Second Battle of Tumbleton, taking the remainder of the vast force headed by Prince Daeron and Lord Ormond Hightower from Old Town. Adam Velaryon, the suspected turncloak, had defended King's Landing from the Queen's enemies at the expense of his own life. The remnants of Sea Smoke and Vermithor became a tourist attraction in the reconstructed Tumbleton. In the TV series, during the War for the Stepstones, Laenor rides Sea Smoke into battle. He is instrumental in bringing the siege of Bloodstone to an end, saving Daemon Targaryen when the prince is wounded and encircled by Triarchy soldiers. On the day of his wedding to Princess Rhaenyra Targaryen, Laenor mounts Sea Smoke toward King's Landing. Rhaenys, his mother, rides the dragon Melis with him. During Laena Velaryon's burial, Sea Smoke and several other dragons remain at high tide. Sea Smoke is left riderless after Laenor fakes his own death and flees into exile, and he continues to stay on Driftmark. Appearance-wise, Sea Smoke was a silver-grey dragon with light skin. He was of fighting size during the dance, yet he was still a juvenile dragon, nimbler in the air than his elder siblings. He was equal in size to Tessarion, who was roughly 3 times smaller than Vermithor and not nearly as terrifying. Terrax was a dragon ridden by Jaenara Belleris, a Valyrian lady. Terrax was flown deeper south into Sothorios by Jaenara than anyone had ever gone before. After 3 years, she returned to the Valyrian freehold, having discovered nothing but unending rainforests, deserts, and mountains. Jaenara declared Sothorios to be a realm without end, and as massive as Essos. Although we have no reason to presume that Terrax was necessarily stronger or larger than any of Daenerys' offspring, given what it managed to do with Jaenara, we doubt it could have competed with the Targaryen dragons that appeared hundreds of years later. Given how little we know, we could be undervaluing Terrax in this situation. The Last Dragon. The last dragon in the Song of Ice and Fire books was a green female who perished during the reign of King Aegon III Targaryen, who acquired the moniker the Dragonbane as a result of being held responsible for her demise. It was rumored that he poisoned the dragon because he had feared them ever since witnessing his uncle's dragon devour his mother, which led to his fear of dragons. The last dragon was frail, tiny, malformed, stunted, and had withering wings. Her identity is unknown. Despite being ill, she did manage to produce a clutch of 5 eggs, which were never fertilized. Sir Duncan the Tall recalls his late tutor, Sir Arlen of Pennytree, informing him that he'd seen the last dragon when he was a youngster in The Hedge Knight, the first of the Tales of Dunk and Egg prequel novellas. The 19 dragon skulls were discovered by Tyrion when he first arrived in King's Landing for his sister's wedding. They were kept in a dark crypt. All that was left of the last 2 hatchlings to be born on Dragonstone was a matched set of skulls scarcely larger than mastiff skulls and bizarrely malformed. They were the final Targaryen dragons, and maybe the last dragons everywhere, he pondered, and they had not lived very long. In Game of Thrones Season 1, when Viserys and Doreah take a bath in Vaes Dothrak, she expresses her desire to see a dragon above all else and inquires if he has seen one. He responds that he hasn't because the last one passed away many years before his birth. He informs her that when he was a little boy, he saw their skulls being used to adorn the Red Keep. The ones nearest to the entrance were the last ones to hatch, he explains to her. He claims that their skulls were a little larger than those of dogs, making them stunted and underdeveloped. The last dragon did belong to House Targaryen, but it didn't have a rider, so technically we're not wrong, hence we've put him on the list. Sheep Stealer. During the Dance of the Dragons, Sheep Stealer was a ferocious dragon with a penchant for mutton. It would hunt between Driftmark and Wendwater and dwell behind Dragonmont. Its name was given by the locals of Dragonstone for the obvious motive. Together with Grey Ghost and Cannibal, he is one of 3 wild dragons. King Jaehaerys I Targaryen was still young when the Sheep Stealer emerged from its egg. The dragon established its den in the Dragonmont tunnels on Dragonstone, and it would pursue sheep as far as Driftmark and the Wendwater. Sheep Stealer was never claimed by a rider in his youth, which made him tougher to claim as time went on, as he became accustomed to the presence of humankind. He eventually lived a wild life on Dragonstone for more than 7 decades, stealing sheep from meadows across Blackwater Bay. As Jacaerys Velaryon urged any prospective dragon seeds to attempt and claim a dragon to ride during the early stages of the Dance of the Dragons, Sheepstealer was one of 4 dragons that humans sought to mount at this occasion, which came to be known as the Sowing, and the only one who had never had a rider before. Sheepstealer eliminated more candidates than the other 3 dragons, Seasmoke, Vermithor, and Silverwing. Alyn of Hull was burnt by the dragon as he attempted to control it, while Silver Denis, who claimed to be a descendant of King Maegor I Targaryen, had his arm severed by Sheepstealer. Through a clever approach, a bastard girl named Nettles ultimately managed to tame the dragon. She left a freshly killed sheep out for the dragon every morning, causing the beast to become accustomed to her presence until he allowed her to mount him. Nettles and Sheepstealer participated in the Battle of the Gullet and the quick capture of King's Landing, after which Sheepstealer created its lair in the Dragon Pit. Nettles and Sheepstealer accompanied Prince Daemon Targaryen and his dragon Caraxes in their pursuit of Aemon Targaryen and Vhagar down the Trident. They stayed at Maidenpool and resumed their search every morning. When Queen Rhaenyra labeled Nettles a traitor for taking her husband Daemon to bed, Nettles departed Maidenpool early in the morning with Sheepstealer after feeding the dragon the biggest black ram present in the castle. The dragon and its rider were then seen soaring above Crab Bay. Sir Robert Rowan led a royal army to the Vale of Arryn to help Sir Joffrey Arryn in 134 AC during the reign of King Aegon III Targaryen. In a cave, Robert's troops came across Sheepstealer and a ragged Nettles, and the subsequent combat killed 16 men and injured 70 more. Nettles and her dragon were last spotted soaring deeper into the mountains of the moon, never to be seen again. The hue of Sheepstealer was a hideous mud brown. Unless provoked, he was not hostile toward others, although he was capable of becoming vicious and irascible. He likes eating mutton. He occasionally consumed a sheepdog, but he never hurt a shepherd. Although it is also acknowledged that Grandmaster Munken never really saw Nettles, Sheepstealer and his rider were characterized by Munken as a thin brown girl riding a slender brown dragon. Therefore, it is unclear if Munken's depiction is accurate. By the time Nettles formed a link with Sheepstealer, he was well over 50 years old and no longer a youthful dragon. However, Dreamfire was regularly described as slender, despite being much older than Sheepstealer. Thus, it's likely that Sheepstealer was both huge and of slender frame. Vermithor. Another Targaryen dragon makes it to the list, and you'll find out why. King Jaehaerys I Targaryen, known as the Old King, had a 55-year-long glorious and wealthy reign. His mount was known as Vermithor. Queen Alysanne Targaryen, the sister wife of Jaehaerys I, also rode a dragon, and Silverwing served as her mount. It has been hypothesized that dragons and their riders have a magical, telepathic, or at the least emotional relationship, leading them to favor friends and despise foes. In this instance, Vermithor and Silverwing were truly mated, simulating the union of their two riders, and remained so till long after the deaths of their original riders. Although it is pretty evident that Vermithor was one of the potent second-generation dragons hatched after the Targaryen conquest, the novels never reveal the genealogy of any of the Targaryen dragons. Vermithor had hatched around the time when Aegon I passed away, since he was around 100 years old when the dance took place. According to history, Vermithor was born in 34 AC from a dragon egg that Rhaena, the sister of Prince Jaehaerys Targaryen, had put in the prince's cradle. By 48 AC, when Prince Jaehaerys staked his claim to the Iron Throne, Vermithor had accepted Jaehaerys as his rider. Jaehaerys arrived in King's Landing on Vermithor to take the throne 9 days after the mysterious death of King Maegor I Targaryen. At one point in his rule, Jaehaerys I travelled to Winterfell with his sister wife, Queen Alysanne Targaryen, and 6 dragons. Jaehaerys pursued Alysanne on Vermithor when she became bored and flew her own dragon Silverwing to the Wall in the north. When Jaehaerys passed away in 103 AC, Vermithor was left without a rider. Vermithor had no new rider during the duration of Jaehaerys' successor, King Viserys I Targaryen. Vermithor stayed on the island of Dragonstone during this period and established his lair in one of the dragon route's smoky tunnels. Prince Jaehaerys Velaryon determined that his mother's group required additional dragon riders in 129 AC after the Dance of the Dragons had begun. Lord Gorman Massey tried to approach Vermithor, who burnt him to death in one of the many attempts by men to claim a dragon as their own. Vermithor eventually bowed his head before Hugh Hammer, a blacksmith's bastard. To fight at the Battle of the Gullet, Hugh rode Vermithor. Seasmoke, Sheepstealer, Vermax, Silverwing, and Vermithor all attacked the 90 vessels flying the 3 daughters' flags. Hugh sent Vermithor down atop the hill of Rhaenys, outside the Dragon Pit, after King's Landing was conquered by Rhaenyra Targaryen's troops. Vermithor built a lair in the Dragon Pit before taking the flight to engage in combat. At the start of the first fight at Tumbleton, Hugh rode Vermithor into battle. Hugh and fellow Dragonseed Ulf the White, who had claimed Silverwing, turned on Rhaenyra and supported Aegon II Targaryen instead. Tumbleton was brutally burned to the ground by Vermithor, Silverwing, and Tessarion, the dragon of Aegon II's brother, Prince Daeron. Hugh and Vermithor stayed in Tumbleton just like the Hightower host did. Hugh Hammer resolved to realize his desire for the throne and declare himself king, as he was the rider of the oldest and largest living dragon, and Aegon II was absent, and Prince Aemon Targaryen had passed away. A 4,000-man army headed by Adam Velaryon on the dragon Seasmoke startled the Hightower force at Tumbleton during the Second Battle of Tumbleton by attacking at night. Hugh hurried to ride Vermithor, but one of the caltrops, Jon Roxton, halted him and cut him down with his Valyrian steel sword, the Orphan Maker. When 200 knights sought to murder a riderless Vermithor, he was still half asleep and on the ground. They were killed during their effort. Vermithor, wounded and enraged, took flight, assaulting everyone in his path. He caught a fleeing knight in his teeth and torched Lords Piper and Deddings along with their squires, servants, and vowed shields. Seasmoke slammed onto Vermithor from above while he was 20 feet over the field. The 2 dragons tumbled across the meadow, intertwined so tightly that neither could break free. Seasmoke, according to Lord Benjiskyle Blackwood, was no match for Vermithor due to the older dragon's size and weight. Lord Blackwood feared that if Tessarion had not intervened, Vermithor would have ripped Seasmoke to shreds. The 3 dragons fought each other to the death. Vermithor murdered Seasmoke by locking his fangs into his neck and ripping his head off. He attempted to fly with his treasure still in his jaws, but his wings were damaged and he couldn't withstand the weight. He slumped and died within a brief period. As we mentioned before, the relics of Vermithor and Seasmoke became a tourist attraction in the reconstructed Tumbleton. Vermithor had enormous tan wings and was a bronze dragon. He was already a giant dragon in 48 AC, smaller than only Balerion and Vhagar. Vermithor was about 100 years old at the time of the Dance of the Dragons. Vermithor was a terrifying beast. Accustomed to mankind and having had a prior Targaryen rider, Vermithor was more accommodating of new riders during the reign of Aegon II Targaryen. Vermithor was frequently coiled with Silverwing. Silverwing. Silverwing was a silvery Targaryen she-dragon. She was thought to be calm and approachable for strangers. She was ridden by Queen Alysanne Targaryen first and subsequently by Ulf White during the Dance of the Dragons. Legend has it that in 36 AC, Alysanne Targaryen's sister Rhaena put a dragon egg in her cradle, and from that egg sprang out Silverwing, like her brother and Vermithor, his dragon. Alysanne, Jaehaerys and their mother Alyssa Velaryon lived on Dragonstone as Dowager Queen Visenya Targaryen's captives in 44 AC. Alysanne, Jaehaerys and Alyssa departed the island in the ensuing tumult after Visenya passed away from natural causes that year, along with Alysanne's dragon Silverwing and Jaehaerys' dragon Vermithor. By 48 AC, Silverwing had agreed to take Alysanne as her rider. Alysanne, her brother Jaehaerys and Rhaena rode their dragons, Vermithor and Dreamfire, to King's Landing after the passing of King Maegor I Targaryen, so Jaehaerys might take the Iron Throne. Without informing the Queen Regent Alyssa Velaryon or the Hand of the King Rhaegar Baratheon, Jaehaerys and Alysanne flew Vermithor and Silverwing from the Red Keep to Dragonstone in 49 AC, so they could secretly wed. For the rest of the King's minority, Dragonstone continued to serve as their haven. In 58 AC, Alysanne led Silverwing on a planned royal journey, including stops at White Harbour, Winterfell, and the Wall. Jaehaerys was initially unable to join, owing to obligations in King's Landing. Tens of thousands of Northerners gathered at White Harbour to applaud Alysanne and stare in amazement and dread at Silverwing. Due to the destruction of Harrenhal, Lord Alaric Stark of Winterfell forbade Silverwing from entering his premises. Later, although being wary, he approached Silverwing under the influence of Alysanne. As Jaehaerys still hadn't arrived at Winterfell, Alysanne became impatient and took Silverwing to the Wall, stopping along the route at Last Hearth and a few other lesser strongholds. The Night's Watch members were in awe of Silverwing at Castle Black as White Harbour residents, although Alysanne noticed that Silverwing did not like this wall. Every frigid gust of wind that came over the wall would be met by the dragons hissing and snapping. Silverwing defied Alysanne's 3 attempts to fly it beyond the wall in the direction she wanted it to travel and turned south each time. In a letter to Jaehaerys, Alysanne expressed her concern about Silverwing's refusal to fly over the wall, despite never having done so before. After reuniting with Jaehaerys in Winterfell, Alysanne took Silverwing there. They flew to Torrhen Square, Barrowton, and then returned to King's Landing. Alysanne rode Silverwing for the final time in 93 AC. As Alysanne laboriously descended off her dragon's back, she wailed like a baby. After Alysanne died in 100 AC, Silverwing was left without a rider. After Alysanne's death, Silverwing went to Dragonstone and established her lair in one of the Dragonmont's burning tunnels. She remained riderless until the Dance of the Dragons in 129 AC. Silverwing is the only one of the 4 riderless dragons claimed during the sowing who is not depicted as murdering any man who attempts to ride her. Silverwing eventually accepted a dragon seed man-at-arms named Ulf the White as her new rider. As told before, when Rhaenyra Targaryen's allies took over King's Landing, Ulf landed Silverwing atop the Hill of Rhaenys, just outside the Dragon Pit. Silverwing built a hideaway in the Dragon Pit before flying out to combat. During the first fight at Tumbleton, Ulf rode Silverwing into battle. Ulf and Hugh Hammer, who had claimed Vermithor, switched allegiances, abandoning Rhaenyra in favor of Aegon II Targaryen. The dragons of Aegon II's brother Prince Daeron, Silverwing, Vermithor and Terrassian unleashed their wrath on Tumbleton, which was cruelly ravaged. Ulf and Silverwing stayed at Tumbleton with the Hightower host. Silverwing was kept free to soar and hunt beyond the town limits. During the Second Battle of Tumbleton, a nighttime attack by an army of 4,000 soldiers commanded by Sir Adam Valerian on the Dragon's sea smoke shocked the Hightower force at Tumbleton. Ulf slept during the combat, but Silverwing flew to the skies, even without a rider. A crossbowman fired a bolt at the dragon at one point. Silverwing avoided additional action by circling the battlefield for hours. After the sun had set the following day, she returned and landed between the dead Vermithor, Seasmoke, and Tessarion. The Singers report that Silverwing attempted to raise Vermithor's wing 3 times, but Archmaester Gildane believes this is fiction. Silverwing flew aimlessly around the field when the sun rose again, feeding on the charred bodies of men and animals. Ulf White, Silverwing's rider, insisted on becoming the next king of the 7 kingdoms because King Aegon II was lost and Prince Aemond and Daeron had perished. When one of the Caltrans caltrops, Sir Hobart Hightower handed Ulf poisoned wine, Silverwing became riderless once more. Silverwing was one of only 4 dragons that survived the Dance of the Dragons. Silverwing grew wild during the reign of Aegon II Targaryen and established her home on a little island in Red Lake in the northwest of the Reach. Aegon rejected Lord Boros Baratheon's recommendation of Silverwing as a replacement for the late Sunfire, since he was too frail to journey across the war-torn kingdom to Red Lake or saddle a mature dragon. During King Aegon III Targaryen's regency, Silverwing remained in Red Lake. Tyraxes. During the Dance of the Dragons, Tyraxes was the dragon tied to Prince Joffrey Valerian, the youngest of Princess Rhaenyra and Laenor Valerian's 3 eldest sons. Joffrey asked his mother to allow him to ride to battle on Tyraxes, but she refused. Later in the conflict, Jacaerys sent Joffrey and their cousin Rhaena of Pentos to the Vale of Arryn to be wards of Jane Arryn, Lady of the Eyrie. Joffrey and Rhaena flew on Tyraxes from Dragonstone to Gulltown, then to the Eyrie. Rhaenyra recalled Joffrey, who flew back to the capital with Tyraxes after capturing King's Landing from the Greens. Tyraxes built his home in the Dragon Pit during their stay in the city, where he escaped during the riots as would-be dragon slayers went after him. Tyraxes' fire killed so many people that the bodies eventually blocked the front entrance to his lair. The throng then entered through the rear door, which perplexed Tyraxes. Tyraxes was claimed to be slain by several men and 1 lady, but in reality, he eventually strangled himself with his own chains. The shepherd's disciples chopped off the membranes of his wings after his death to fashion dragon skin cloaks. Tyraxes thrived and grew larger with each passing year. He was a little smaller than Vermax and Arax. He could fly long distances with his rider by the time of the Dance of the Dragons, but needed to be larger for combat. Vermax. Vermax was a dragon that Prince Jacaerys Valerian rode. Vermax was big enough to ride by the time the Dance of the Dragons began. As a messenger for his mother, Queen Rhaenyra Targaryen, Prince Jacaerys traveled north on his back to meet Jane Arryn, Lady of the Eyrie, Desmond Manderley, Lord of White Harbor, and Cregan Stark, Lord of Winterfell. The expedition was successful, since all 3 expressed their support for Rhaenyra and her blacks. Mushroom says in his testimony that Vermax laid a brood of eggs in the depths of Winterfell's crypts, although this story is most likely incorrect. During the Battle of the Gullet, Prince Jacaerys utilized Vermax in battle. Vermax assaulted a fleet there, but he flew too low and crashed into the water. There are several stories on how and why the dragon fell, but the fall also resulted in Jacaerys' death. Vhagar. Visenya Targaryen rode the dragon Vhagar, renowned as the queen of all dragons during the War of Conquest. Vhagar, the smallest of the trio that comprised Balerion and Meraxes at the time, was nonetheless enormous enough to swallow a horse whole, and her flames could melt armor. She's the biggest of all known living dragons and the only remaining dragon from the days of Aegon's conquest 100 years later, during the reign of Viserys I Targaryen. Visenya continued to ride Vhagar to battle during the Faith Militant movement, burning down rebel strongholds in the Riverlands, as she had before burnt out fortresses in Dorne. Vhagar died late in Maegor's reign, and her riders for the following 60 years, if any, are unknown. Vhagar went riderless for many years after Visenya's death, first in the yards of Dragonstone and eventually in King's Landing's Dragon Pit. Vhagar ultimately found a new rider in the king's second son, Prince Balon, during the reign of King Jaehaerys I, when his and good Queen Alicent's offspring created an excess of Targaryens to claim the surviving dragons. During the Fourth Dornish War, Balon rode Vhagar into battle with his father perched atop Vermithor and his elder brother Prince Aemon astride Caraxes. Later, after Myrish pirates assassinated Aemon on Tarth, Balon exacted a terrible vengeance on them by unleashing Vhagar's wrath. Balon was appointed Prince of Dragonstone and Hand of the King for his actions during the Tarth War, but he died of a ruptured stomach some years later, leaving Vhagar without a rider once again. Balerion perished of old age later in the Old King's reign, making Vhagar the oldest and biggest of the Targaryen dragons. Despite being one of the most well-known dragons in the narrative, having been referenced since the first novel, Vhagar's coloring remained unknown for 25 years. Balerion, the first of the 3 Targaryen dragons, was said to be black with crimson accents, whereas Meraxes' color wasn't disclosed until The World of Ice and Fire was published in 2014. This became a source of discontent among fans, who regularly pressed George R.R. Martin about it in Q&A sessions, but he would only say that he hadn't decided yet and continued to put it off. The official 2021 A Song of Ice and Fire calendar finally revealed Vhagar's color. Artist Sam Hogg had to create a drawing of Vhagar and inquired directly with Martin's team, who answered that Vhagar was bronze with greenish-blue accents and green eyes. In The House of Dragon, Season 1, Viserys explains to Lady Laena Velaryon that although Vhagar hasn't been seen in a while, the Dragon Keepers thought she may have built her nest near the narrow seas shore. Vhagar could no longer stay in the dragon pit due to her growing size. Laena claims that occasionally traders in Spicetown on her home Driftmark claim to hear her music, which sounds depressing. Viserys reflects that even dragons experience loneliness. Vhagar becomes Laena's mount more than a decade later. Laena takes great satisfaction in riding the world's most enormous known living dragon with her husband Daemon and his own dragon Caraxes. Later, Laena gave a rough birth, with everyone assuming the kid must be extracted from her in order for the baby to survive. Unwilling to die in bed, she walks outdoors to locate Vhagar before issuing the order Dracarys. Vhagar hesitates, hesitant to burn her rider despite her anguished instructions. She eventually gives in and releases her dragonfire, incinerating Laena to avoid a more prolonged and terrible death. Days later, while sleeping on High Tide's beach, Vhagar is woken by Aemon Targaryen, who wishes to ride a dragon. She first rejects his effort to mount her and returns to slumber. But when Aemon attempts again, Vhagar almost releases dragonfire on him before being successfully controlled in High Valyrian by Aemond. Aemon takes her for her first flight after claiming and bonding with her. Though he almost falls to his death due to not correctly fastening himself to the saddle, he is able to fly her over Driftmark. Aemon later rides Vhagar home after the royal family's return to King's Landing. In order to meet with Lord Boros Baratheon and solicit his assistance for Aegon, Aemond rides Vhagar to Storm's End. She observes Arrax and Lucerys Velaryon's entrance. Aemond, along with Vhagar, chases after Lucerys and Arrax in an effort to frighten the young prince and steal one of his eyeballs in retaliation for losing his own. Vhagar almost manages to grab Arrax numerous times, but she loses sight of him as he flies into a ravine that is too narrow for her to pursue. But despite Luke's intentions, Arrax spins around and fires Dragonflame toward Vhagar. Vhagar is furious and chases, oblivious to Aemond as he struggles vainly to retake control of her. Vhagar snatches Arrax in her jaws above the storm and rips her in two, along with devouring Lucerys. Marvelous verdict. As Season 1 of House of the Dragon has ended and we've only been introduced to half of the dragons, we can't wait for Season 2, when the dance begins and more dragons are introduced on the screen. Which dragon's debut are you excited the most for? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to click on the like and share button if you enjoyed watching. I'll see you in the next one.